Thuja, Thuja plicata or plicata, and a beautiful big tree. Yeah, that's a Douglas fir cone. Like the incense cedar we saw earlier, the western red cedar's needles are flattened into scales. But the scales on this don't have a wine glass pattern, they have a little crisscross pattern on it. So you're welcome to come up and take a look, or if you find there's some fronds that are on the ground. So that's the foliage. The bark, I'll hold this down. The bark is long and thin and in strips like this that's kind of got a purplish tinge to it. And the cones are quite small, a little bit larger than the western hemlock.
This one has cones on it. Those are male cones.
Yep, those are the pollen-bearing cones. I'm looking for an old female cone. So here's a little cluster of the little female cones that look like little urns that open up like this. Kind of like little nesting dolls.
On the end of the fronds.
Now this tree was supremely important to the indigenous peoples, the Coast Salish people, the ones in particular that were in this area of Lake Washington referred to themselves as the Hakcha-Abish, or the inside people, meaning not on the salt water, but more in the fresh water. And this was the most important single tree to their daily lives. The wood of western red cedar is very easy to work with. It's generally straight and true without a lot of knots in it. So they would use this for canoes. They would fell a tree, put hot coals and burn out the center, and then with their axes and adze shape the canoe. They used it for smoking pipes. They used the wood for spears. And our Coast Salish people recognized the value of resource conservation. So instead of every family having their own individual house, they lived communally in long houses. Many families living in one structure, which saved more natural resources. So they used the wood of these for the beams for their long houses. So the wood was very important. The foliage was matted together and used as insulation in blankets and in clothing. The bark was peeled off. You can peel the bark off and oh, that's all right, of course.
Yeah.
Oh.
Gotta go swimming when we're here. Wow.
You guys have good ones.
They would peel this bark, and you can peel it down and scrape the inside of the bark, and you get this very soft material that they used for diapers and for blankets for infants, very soft. They would weave the bark together into baskets and clothing. Even the purplish color of the bark, they would extract, put them in baskets on hot water and extract the color for pigmentation in their clothing, or blankets, or vests, in their baskets, and even their fishing nets they would camouflage with the color of this.
Rain capes they would make.
Yeah. So every part of this tree was used by indigenous peoples in their lives. And when white Europeans in the 1850s came to first Alki Point and then Elliott Bay, they recognized how important this tree was. So their term for the indigenous peoples, they call them the people of the cedar, because they used this tree and it was so important to their lives. So it's a tree that likes it moist, likes to have its root tips in moist ground for most of the time. It's pretty shade tolerant, not as shade tolerant as the western hemlock, but still pretty shade tolerant, and can grow to be huge sizes with multiple stout trunks that are like flutings coming off of it. And like the western hemlock, it even grows as far east as Glacier National Park in Montana, western Montana. On the damp west side, you can find some western red cedars, but that's the extent of it. And now for the confusing part of plant names. Remember I mentioned earlier about how, sometimes when you hear a common name for a tree, it isn't really what the tree is. Well, it's the same as true for this. The incense cedar, remember I said it wasn't really a cedar? Western red cedar's not. These are all members of the cypress family. They're not cedars at all. In fact, There are only 4 true cedars in the world, and none of them are native to North America. They're in the genus Cedrus, and they're the, 3 species. The deodar cedar, which is native to India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, foothills of the Sierras. It's a big tree like the Douglas fir. The Atlas cedar, which is from the Atlas Mountains of North Africa, and the cedar of Lebanon, the cedar that's mentioned in the Bible and grows. And in fact, the Lebanese flag has the cedar of Lebanon tree as part of its flag. So those are the only true cedars in the world. Everything we call a cedar in North America is really a cypress family member. And cypresses are known for having their needles flattened into scales. The way you can tell is that if the common name has a hyphen or is a compound word, that's the clue that it's not really the name of the tree that it says it is. So western red cedar, 1 word. Incense cedar is 2 words, but still it's a cypress family member. The Douglas fir, remember how we talked about it's not really a fir? Douglas hyphen fir. Yeah, so you end up banging your head like, why don't they just call it what? Well, that's the plant world for you. That's, yeah, many times things aren't. And when you get into birds, this morning I was talking the same thing. The red-bellied woodpecker, you never see the red feathers in the belly. The ring-necked duck, you never see the ring around the duck's neck. The ruby crown kinglet, it's tough to see that ruby crown unless he flashes it. Well, it's because before the days that optics were invented, you could look at birds. How did you study birds?
Stuff them.
Yep, shoot them, take them, put them on a table and examine them, and oh, look at the red feathers in the belly of the. So that's why the names don't seem to make sense when you're looking at it from the field. And in the plant world, we have our version of nonsensical things like, why do they call it a. So everything we call a cedar is really a cypress family member. It's a very cool grouping of trees.
Humans get a lot of mileage out of stuff that's dead. And this tree that I'm leaning against, it has very rot-resistant lumber. And it's almost as rot-resistant as the coast redwood. So where are our values? Our values are probably in a very short-term time frame for many humans, but that doesn't mean that there's a lot of other values, and this tree as a living object is just a creature that is so beautiful. And also another nice thing is on these older trees, the tops get busted up by winds and snow and other kinds of storms, by other trees hitting them, and that gives them this wonderfully craggy, mature look. And a lot of people would say, oh, it's not a nubile, perfect looking symmetrical shape of a tree. It doesn't have a pointed outline, and that's not really the nicest part. So there has become this thing called recreational tree climbing. And in the last 25 years, there has been a movement to become recreational tree climbers using mountaineering equipment that has been converted over to use in trees. And so I've been privileged to help design these new systems of rope access that are kind of similar to what a ski patrol or a high-angle rescue, search and rescue crew would use. And the tops of these western red cedar trees, the western hemlock trees, the Doug fir trees, and the Sitka spruce trees are the most amazing, complex shapes of fractured, tortured, living plant material that you will ever encounter. So if you want to see some of that, surf over to my YouTube channel where I have about 700 videos on Michael Oxman.
And the Hyperion tree has been climbed.
I haven't climbed that one.
No, but it has been climbed with ropes. Yeah, and the big, what's the second or third tall? It's a eucalyptus in Australia. They've climbed, and they drop plumb bob lines from the top as well as do laser measurements and all that to get the footage. So yeah, big tree climbing is a real thing, and there's a lot of videos on them. Like here's from the comfort of your easy chair, you can go up into the canopy, which is a whole realm of life with epiphytic air plants, types of fungi that aren't found on the forest floor that are thriving up there in their own climate, ecological niche up there. And it's, everything is more incredible than we think it is. Well, we're going to go over the crest.